Hello, hello, hello. Claire Wasserman here, founder and author of Ladies Get Paid. We are an educational platform, global community, and of course, a book that is all about helping women earn more and live better. And in that ethos, I am inviting coaches every day or as many days as I can to join me because they also share that mission of wanting women to earn more and live better. Yanely Espinal, she is a master at this in the money game. I'm going to have you, well, Miss Be Helpful. I'm going to have you go into more detail exactly about what you do and how you do it and why you do it. But one thing I think we all need to just give a big round of applause for is this beautiful book behind you called Mind Your Money. This gorgeous, yes, right there. That's going to be a big focus of our conversation about her book, what's in it, and more specifically, how you can reach your hashtag money goals. But I just, Miss Be Helpful, I want to welcome you to the stage. And if you can just give us a little more insight into what you do, how you do it, and why you do it, I think that'd be a great place to begin.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, first of all, Claire, for having me. Love, love, love everything that you're doing with Ladies Get Paid. So it's my honor to be here. But for everyone who's not familiar with me and my work, as Claire mentioned, my name is Yanely Espinal. Online, I go by Miss Be Helpful, and my book Mind Your Money was just released May 30th, 2023. So it's been out for what, maybe 2-3 weeks as we film this. 2 weeks as we film this live, and it's been very exciting to be a first-time author. I'm first generation, a daughter of Latina immigrant, and my dad's Latino immigrant, but from Dominican Republic. So sort of like this Caribbean culture. And they didn't speak any English when they moved to the US. They didn't have any education beyond the second or third grade in school, didn't have any money, and didn't have any network. So they came here with little to nothing, and had 9 children in New York City. So I grew up in a very interesting, high energy environment, a lot of love, but not a lot of money, not a lot of talk about money. And so I graduated college and became a classroom teacher because I've always had this desire to serve others. And I think I got that from my parents. Even though we didn't have a lot, they've always been like of service and helping others. So I started my teaching career. And then sooner rather than later, I realized, I don't want to keep teaching because there's no financial education in the school system. And I want to actually change that. So I didn't really know how to do it. So I just started creating videos on YouTube under my channel name, MissBeHelpful. And then after a few years of posting content on YouTube, a lot of organizations started to reach out to me and ask me to speak, to do public speaking, to do coaching, to do workshops and keynotes. And so I sort of pivoted to becoming a full-time financial educator by starting off on YouTube and just teaching myself a lot of the personal finance basics that I put in my new book.
Amazing. I also would love if you could just to share the story of what you learned watching your mother, who was this very talented seamstress, not stand up for her worth. I mean, first and
Yes.
foremost, not maybe know her worth,
Mhm.
and then the next, what you learned in witnessing that. I think it's such a profound story and
Yeah.
a good place for us to begin.
Let's do that. So, Claire hosted an event recently for an amazing group of women to share. I was lucky to be part of that, and I told this story, which I try to tell often when we're talking about discussions around money specifically for women. So, when I was a young kid, I remember my mom always had been the seamstress in my neighborhood. She learned how to sew from her mom, and she made everybody's prom dresses and communion dresses and graduation dresses and Easter dresses, cover all these different, dresses for festive occasions. And pretty soon people just started to bring her like other projects and things for her to sew. I remember this one particular project that came to her was very difficult because it was like leather fabric. It was these leather pants. And she spent hours and hours making this pair of pants. And I remember her like, with a hunchback over her sewing machine late at night working, just trying to, figure out this design and the way that these pants would be sewn together with this pattern. And when it was time for the client to come pick up her pair of pants, she asked my mom, how much do I owe you? And my mom was like, well, you paid for the fabric and you brought me the materials. I think, if you give me $25, I think she like, and I just was in my mind, I was like, I can't believe this. Like, she was up all night. And this is not just a one time thing. This was a habit. My mom was constantly undercharging, and I mean grossly undercharging for her talents and her work. And I think that early on, it showed me how shy she was. Maybe she was ashamed to charge money. Maybe she was uncomfortable because she never had money. maybe she just thought that people wouldn't think it was worth the money to pay. Like maybe she just thought this is kind of what the value I think would be. She maybe didn't understand what was fair. And maybe she feels like money is dirty. I don't want to, I don't feel good asking people for money. A lot of that I imagine was running through her mind because she was not the breadwinner ever in my family. My dad was, and she would often have to ask my dad for money. She'd have to be like, Arturo, like, we need money for school supplies. We need money for groceries. And he'd be like, no, let me think about it. I'll see if I can come up with some money to give you. And she always had to defer to him and wait on him for money. So I think maybe she just wasn't comfortable. And I learned that lesson early on that you really can't be like that. You got to advocate for yourself. And even, through my early 20s, I was uncomfortable charging for services and for work and my skill set. But I knew enough that like that lesson that I saw, watching my mom do that was sort of a little bit of internalized trauma around as a woman feeling shame around, money and charging for your work.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that story. And I know stories are a big part of what's in your book. So could you just walk us through what exactly the book is about, who's in it, and then we can dig into some lessons?
Yes. Okay. So this book is a combination of personal finance and personal stories. And I think that the reason why I chose to go that route is because I had read dozens of personal finance. I mean, if you're watching this live, you could see the books behind me. Like I have spent so many years becoming obsessed and in personal finance because it was really my way of self-educating myself after making a bunch of mistakes with my own credit cards and getting into a bunch of debt and feeling a lot of social pressure to spend, just mindlessly. So I felt like, okay, as I was reading all of these books, the one element that was missing for me was the personal experiences that align with things that I've witnessed and I've lived through. So growing up in a household where neither one of your parents had bank accounts, neither one of your parents had debit cards, ever had a credit card, ever had a checkbook, never wrote a check.
Right.
These are the types of things where I feel like every book that I would read, it would be like, I remember my dad wrote a check, or I remember my dad talked to me about a mutual fund when I was 18, and I'd be like, what? Like WTF? Everybody has these conversations with their mom and dad, or has seen something around money with their mom and dad, except me. Like that can't be. It's the problem is that nobody like me has told their stories in books about money yet. And so for me, that was kind of like the fire under my butt. That was like, all right, you have to do it. You have to be the one. Get up and tell the stories because there are so many others like you out there who aren't seeing their stories reflected, just like you're not seeing them reflected. And that's not going to change unless you change it. So, it really empowered me to tell stories about my life. And so just the very first page of the book is a childhood story of me screaming at the top of my lungs in my mom's backyard about her being out of the house because she went to a welfare appointment to renew her food stamps. And I yelled that. And my sister, who was probably a teenager, she was probably like 16 at the time, and I was about 9, she was pissed. I mean, she was mad as hell. When I walked back in the house, she knocked me on the top of my head with her like knuckles. She knocked me and was like, are you stupid? Why are you yelling to everybody on our block? The whole street is going to know that mom's on welfare. You're telling everyone our business. And I was confused because the whole block, everyone on my street, everyone in my neighborhood was also on welfare. This was a very low income neighborhood in Brooklyn back in the 90s and early 2000s. Like, I'm like, everybody's in the struggle. We are struggling. But there, that early lesson at the age of 9, it stuck with me that, you don't talk about money. We don't yell these things. We don't tell our business out there. No matter what you're going through, money is taboo. It's private, and it's not something that you should talk about or let anybody else know what you have or don't have.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you decide what stories to share? And what are like the major lessons from
Ooh,
these stories?
I love this question. It's so tricky. It's so tricky to choose stories because
Yeah.
there's so many stories. I mean, I'll tell you, I cut out so many stories just because of the simple fact that I wanted my book to be digestible, easy to read, fun, and I wanted it to be short, on the shorter side. So it's like 220 pages, under 220 pages. And so because of that, I had to cut out a lot of stories, but I chose to keep the ones that were really impactful for me, like truly were some of the core memories that I've had around money mindset, or, the root of kind of why I made the choices that I made with money, fundamental and foundational experiences around money. And so for me, that's experiences like, being scolded and being knocked over the head because I said too much about our family's financial situation, and stories of me stealing. I included one of me getting caught stealing at a pharmacy. I went in and bought, or was trying to buy some lip gloss for my god sister, and didn't have enough money, so I just slipped it up my sleeve, and it got caught on camera. They stopped me on the way out, and my sister, who was completely innocent, I feel so sorry for my sister. Every time I tell the story, I say I'm sorry to her because she had no idea. And yeah, they stopped us. They brought us to the back of the store, and they showed the footage of me stealing. And so things like that, where I feel like, it's fundamental to who I am, and the things that have happened to me related to money. But two, the other thing is stories that I feel like we don't like to share. Like it would be easier for me to not tell the story of me getting caught stealing, to not include that, right? Paints me in a better picture. But that, for that reason, I challenge myself to say, no, I'm not going to take out those stories. I'm going to keep those in there, because somebody else who's going through something tricky or difficult, or who caught, a teenager out there stealing and is assuming that they're just being mischievous, or that they are just a bad kid. Like, this may help people be more empathetic to young people dealing with poverty, and understanding the mindset that goes into the decisions that you make when it comes to money.
Oh, so good. I'm glad that you shared that story. I mean, that's where you and I are so aligned, where it's like, if something feels uncomfortable, instead of shying away, that to me is an indicator that we need to dig in
Girl,
to
yes.
why. And also, whatever it is that you're going through, no doubt somebody else is also experiencing it. So this, in terms of the money goals, right? Given that this is what we're calling today is live, right? How to reach your money goals. How do you determine what your goals are, right? Like, if you're starting from a place where you just feel really overwhelmed, you're in a ton of debt. I mean, I know you used to be in debt, you got out of it within 18 months. Like, where do you know, like, you only have so much time and energy and resources? Like, where do you begin in determining what your goals actually are, let alone coming up with a plan to achieve them?
Yeah. Oh, this is such a good question. I mean, and I think it's going to be very different for everybody, but I would say no matter what your goal ultimately ends up being to get started, before you even start on that, it's got to be the mindset first.
Yeah.
So I think everybody's first exercise is to think about the role that money plays in your life, and what you believe about money, and why you value or don't value money, or making more money, because that relationship that we have with money is often not discussed. It's often kind of like subconscious thoughts that we don't really have top of mind, and honestly, like, do a lot of like the magic wand waving in the background to make things happen that we're not even really aware is going on in our head and in our lives. So for me, the whole first chapter of the book is kind of like the intro to my story, my personal stories. And then the second chapter is dedicated just to the chapter is called Get Your Mind Right. And it's just to mindset and the behavioral psychology and the behavioral finance around money decisions that you make, and thinking about what are all the biases, what are all the ways that our brains trick us when money is involved and when we're making choices about what to do with our money. Because if you can really grasp that and get comfortable with that, I think then it becomes very clear what your first goal should be, whether that's to pay down debt, whether that's to stack up your savings, whether that's to get started investing. Like, once you figure out that money mindset, the way you think about money and the role it plays in your life, it's going to become very clear what's missing. Right now, my relationship with money is really bad because all I do is worry that I don't have enough money. And it's because I have nothing in my savings account. Amazing. Now that we've said that, we've named it, you're going to start with your emergency savings fund, right? So it kind of really happens with that internal work around your mindset with money. And then it kind of lightens up, okay, very easily what you should do next. But for most people, it's going to be a very, specific order of events, right? Like the savings, right? You can focus on debt repayment all you want, but if something happens, emergency comes up, you're gonna have to interrupt your debt repayment to handle that emergency. And if you don't have savings, you're gonna end up going into more debt to handle that. So for most people, it's savings first, and then figuring out what comes next, whether that's investing or paying off debt, or having another very specific goal that you want to build up for.
What are some of the common psychological blockers that you have found either in your life or in your clients' lives? And then, given those blockers, what might be new ways to look at it or work through it?
Okay, so in chapter 2, I call these behavioral scientists and economists my uncles and aunties. And the reason why is because I feel like they have felt like uncles and aunties to me. The more I've read about them and read their research, like I really have felt like they've swayed me to be more mindful about these biases and how we can fight against them. So one of the ones that I include in there is I call him Uncle Shlomo, and there's a TED talk that Shlomo Bernartzi talked that presented, and it's called "Save for Tomorrow." Tomorrow. And the reason I love this because we have this mental bias, this cognitive bias, that the way that we think is that we're going to handle it in the future. Like the future me is going to be on this, going to be on top of this. She's going to handle this. Like right now, I just can't do it. But the future me, she's going to do it. And we think that we're so perfect in the future that we're going to handle everything that we're not handling now. But the truth is, if you're not doing it now, future is going to come and you're not doing it in the future either because you're not doing it now. You're not doing it later. So current you has to take steps and actions to make sure that your future self is actually doing the things that you started doing. So it's funny because we separate the current version of us from the future version of us when actually we need to equate them. We need to, in our minds, think of them as the same exact person because it is the same person. It's you. And so for us, for me, at least that acknowledgement, like, okay, that person is me. So if I'm saying, oh, when I get my raise, that's when I'm going to start investing in my 401k. No, if you don't start investing in your 401k now, you ain't going to start when you get your raise.
Right.
That kind of thinking. So I think that the way to counter that is to, first of all, acknowledge and equate that your future self is your current self. It's the same self. Same skin, same body, a couple years older, but same person. And then the second thing to do is to try to find ways that you can commit to doing things that are financially savvy, but you can commit to doing them now so that even in the future, if you change your mind, you can't opt out. So like the example I give in the book is one of my first jobs after college. There was a 401k that I got a chance to sign up for. And there was a little box that you could check on the form that said, every year, we will automatically increase your contribution by 1% if you tick this box.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, that's that thing. Like, that's how you can force your future self to commit to doing something. You can't undo it. And so I checked the little box, and every year they increased my 401k contributions by 1%. I didn't feel it very much, but it made a big difference 5 years later when I was contributing 5% more than I was when I started. So those are the types of things that we got to try to find and take advantage of.
Yeah, I love that. I just want to talk about your debt real quickly because that is something that you were in $20,000 of credit card debt, but you paid it off in just 18 months.
Right.
How the heck did you do that?
Yeah. Everybody was asking me like, that's a lot. It was a lot. And the reason why, now, of course, when we think about like the student loan debt crisis and stuff, we hear people with 6 figures worth of debt. So 20K doesn't seem that bad. But the reason why in context it is really bad is because credit cards interest rates are astronomical. Like my interest rates on my student credit cards were like above 22, 23% interest. So, you're paying so much in fees to these banks when you don't pay off your credit card in full every single month, which I was not doing.
Right.
So, I mean, I think all in all, throughout my 4 years of college, I probably spent out of pocket between $12,000 and $13,000 myself. And the other $6,000 to $7,000 was interest that had continued to accrue every year for the 4 years that I was just sending my little minimum payment due and not doing anything more than the bare minimum. So, those interest fees really added up and hurt me so bad when I finally sat down to look at all of my credit, my credit card bills. I realized it was over 20K, and that scared the crap out of me. I was like, okay, how did I let it get this bad? Like what the hell is going on? So, in order to pay it off, I actually used the debt repayment method in Susie Orman's book called Women and Money. I was about to plug my own book. Susie Orman's book called Women and Money. It was the first book about money that I ever read. And it was in my early 20s. So I'm so glad I picked it up when I did, because she has a 9-month debt repayment plan. And I basically did that twice through. I just kept going for 18 months, but I was paying, I want to say somewhere between $1,200 to $1,500 every single month. I would take half of my paycheck and just send it immediately when I got my check to the credit card companies. And so over $1,000 every month for 18 months. It's the only way I was able to knock out that 20K in 18 months.
Right. Love this. And did you automate it? Or at least you had
I automated the minimum and a couple extra hundred, and then the
Okay.
other amount I would go in and manually add it. And the reason why I did that is because one, it would change every month because I had a lot of side hustles at that time. So I was a teacher and I was
Mhm.
making about $1,200 to $1,300 every check. So half of the first check was automatically going to the credit cards.
Yeah.
And then the other paycheck, sometimes I was able to put even more because I was babysitting on Thursdays and Fridays, Saturdays. I would tutor after school. I would stay and the parents would pay me to tutor. I was doing on screen instruction for digital learning companies. This is even before the pandemic, which is wild that there was a lot
Yeah.
of digital learning going on back then. And so I was taking those jobs that I would find online on job boards and stuff, and all of that extra money, I would then say, okay, how much is this? And then I would make another payment and add to it whatever I could afford to put on top of my payments.
How did you also train yourself to spend less, I guess?
Mm.
Because somebody could be hearing this going, "Oh god, all right, fine, I'll do it." But then that means I have less money because A, it's going to my credit card, and B, I'm not theoretically using my credit card either.
Ooh, girl, training. I did it cold turkey because
Mhm,
I couldn't trust myself and I caught myself in the act, which is how I know I couldn't trust myself. So
mhm.
I started the repayment journey. I started, I made the commitment, like I'm serious about this. I'm paying this off. A couple of days later, I leave work, the school I was teaching at, and I get online, like I'm like waiting for the bus at the bus stop. And I'm standing there, I'm like waiting for the bus, and I'm like, oh, kind of want something like a snack or something to do. I walk into the store and I'm like, oh, okay, let me pick up some things, might as well. So I pick up some lotions, little candles, a snack here, maybe a Snapple, a Snickers bar, granola bar, go get on the bus. And then later on, I'm looking over and I'm like, wait, when did I spend $15.65? I didn't spend that. I didn't spend it. And I'm like, oh, I went into, dang. So what I did to go cold turkey, the next day when I left for work, I did not pack my debit card, my credit card, no
Yeah,
cash,
yeah.
nothing. I left with no money on me except I had
Wow, wow.
train pass, my bus pass. I had lunch packed. I had my
Yeah,
laptop, my books, my keys, a water bottle, an
yeah,
apple in case I got hungry. I packed stuff and I was like, whatever I need, I got. Like I can
yeah,
get to and from work. I got what I need. And I know a lot of people will be like, oh my God, but what if there's an emergency? I was just gonna get hop on the train and go home.
yeah.
And so I left school. I walked to the subway. I'm literally making my way. I stop into the store. I pick up some things to buy. And I walk up to the merchant, I'm like, "Oh,
Oops, no
oops."
money.
Yes,
Yeah,
literally, I was so embarrassed. I was like, I didn't know what to say. I was so embarrassed. So I like lied. I was like, "Oh, I left my money. I left my wallet in my car. I'm gonna be right back." Girl, I don't have a car. I was lying. I was
yeah, you
lying.
live in New York City, we don't have a car.
Right. I was like, I don't have a car. So yeah, I just knew in that moment, like I caught myself. I have a
Yeah,
problem. This is
yeah,
basically an addiction. Is when
yeah,
you cannot stop yourself from doing something, even though you committed to stopping. You
yeah.
said, I want to stop. I don't
Right,
want to
right.
do this. But obviously I kept doing it because I was addicted to shopping, spending little things, just a little
Yeah.
shopaholic. And so that was pretty much how I forced myself to stop. After doing that for a couple months, then I started carrying my debit card and credit card again because then I was like, I know I can trust myself
Right,
now because
right.
I've basically trained myself to stop.
I think that's a wonderful lesson, though. It's like we all try to rely on, or we think we should rely on willpower and motivation. No, just create conditions that make it
Boom.
easier for you to make the choice that you committed to making.
That's right.
It's like if my phone was right in front of me and I'm like, don't look at social media, don't look at social media. I mean, that's like spending way more energy that I don't need to be spending. So guess what? My phone's not in front of me. I have it in the other room, right? Like
Boom.
just literally make it easy for yourself. I realized that because I also got into 20,000, I had exactly $20,000 worth of credit card debt as well, which is super
Wow.
interesting. I don't
Mhm.
remember how long it took me to pay off, but something I realized that I had a problem was when I would go into shop, like I'd be walking by Zara, H&M, a lot of it was fast fashion.
Yep.
It was noticing that physically I started to get a high. I was like in the
Mm.
store and I'm like, heart is racing. I literally feel energy shifting. And that's when I thought, I think those are the
Wow.
signs of addiction. Like this is something. And I'm not going to be like, Claire, be reasonable in the store. No, just don't go into the store. Like,
Exactly.
why challenge
Exactly.
myself if I don't have to?
Yes, I love that. And I love that because it's true. It's true. You sort of giving yourself a little bit of grace. You recognize that you have a problem. stop putting yourself in a situation to face that problem. Just
Right.
don't avoid it, because that's going to make it that much easier. Now, of course, if you're still doing things, even when you're trying to change your environment, then you might need some external help. Then you might need to talk to a therapist, a coach. You might need to go, and seek help. But at least that's a way to start on your own when you recognize that you have a problem. I totally agree.
Right. And making things automatic, right? So if like, yes, I know I should save, but if that is going to require you to now take actions that will then in turn require you to have motivation to take the action, you're exhausted, you're busy. If there's
Yes.
something that you can do to make your life easier, what might be some of those quote hacks, whether they're tools, any kind of resource, like ways in which we can just set ourselves up for financial success? I'm sure you have
Mhm.
many tips on that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the easiest one, and most people will say this whenever you ask them for like the one most powerful thing you could do when it comes to money, which is automate. Just automate it, set it up in a way where it's going to happen whether you remember to do it or not, it's going to get done. And, one of the most powerful things to automate that I think a lot of people don't realize they can do is actually set up separate points for your direct deposit to hit. So
Okay.
instead of your direct deposit all coming through to one account, set up your direct deposit to multiple accounts. So that way you're using one main account and you've already, just taken a chunk of your paycheck, not the entire paycheck, because you've, set it up to put maybe 10% in your savings account, another 5% in your long-term investment goals account, and then the rest of it would, 85% would come into your main checking account. So I think that, like, if you can't train yourself to keep
Right.
forcing yourself to save 15%, well, then just automate it. And when you see the direct deposit hit, it's automatically giving you 85% of your income. So you're forcing yourself in essence to like save. So automating is great. Automating investments too works amazing. I mean, I set up all automated investments on my, retirement accounts, on my brokerage account. I automate it to send a couple $100 every single month. And then if I have more, I'll send another additional payment. But
Right.
at least automating to make sure that I know it's going to get done. And a lot of people say, well, what if, you're really low income, or what if, you don't have enough money to automate because, you have variable income.
Right.
And I would say, even then, I would challenge you to still automate all of your minimums, because
Mhm.
at the very least, you want to make sure that you don't mess up your own credit because you were stressing and you forgot to send a payment. So by making sure you automate all your minimums, you're never going to mess up your credit by missing a minimum payment. So that's really important, because, when it comes to your credit score, your payment, not missing a payment, is called payment history. That's 35% of your whole credit score, your whole grade. So it makes a big, big deal. And I think automating is one simple way to do it. And I think the second thing I would add is just have quick check-in meetings with yourself. Like, we all make time for so many of the things that we care about. We will spend 2 hours doing our makeup. Ladies, I know. I mean, don't, laugh it off. For me, I'll probably do 10, 15 minutes to do my makeup. I'll do my mascara, my eyeliner, little whatever, cheek blush, this, that. But I've seen my girls, my sisters, people that I know spend 2 hours or more
Right.
on their makeup. So
Right.
spend 2 hours once a month on your finances, girl.
Right. Right.
Take
Right.
the
Like,
time.
for everybody who says they don't have the time, they probably do. They're just choosing to spend it
Choosing.
elsewhere. Yeah, right. How did you come up with the title of your book?
Yeah. Okay. Well, girl, I'm gonna tell you the truth. I had this whole separate title that I wanted. I wanted
Okay.
to call my book "Stay Broke Then."
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Because I was like, oh, if you don't listen to the advice in the book, stay
Right.
broke then. But that's like, my Brooklyn energy, my New York
Right.
City self coming out. And, all the folks that I was working at, shout out to Scribe Media, because all the folks there were like, we see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
But you might not want to offend the reader before they even look inside your book. It can come off as like an offensive statement. You're calling your reader broke before they even pick up
Right.
your book. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll think of something else. And I was really committed to that title. So once I started thinking again, I was like, well, I like the fact that it's just 3 words. So I wanted to keep like a short title. I wanted to be something you could easily remember. And I started thinking about how growing up, little girls, we always tell each other, especially, when you grow up sassy, like me, we tell each other, mind your business.
Yeah.
Mind your business. We're always saying mind your business. But what does that really mean? It really means that you got to mind your money before you even have a business. You need to be money minded. If most businesses, and I don't have a statistic for this, but I would venture to say that it's very high. Most businesses fail because within a few years, and I would say most of them, it fails because of the numbers, their money, their finances, their bookkeeping, their accounting, their taxes, their revenue versus their cash flow. They are not properly managing the finances of the business. And because of that, that's why I would say most businesses fail, because it's very easy to just get caught up by mingling your finances with the business's finances and not keeping track of your inflow and outflow, your expenses, of your contracts versus your actual cash collected. Like these things, it's a lot. And so I would say it came from really this idea of like, we're out here saying mind your business all the time, but like we're skipping a step. Mind your money. And then, I had been doing interviews on my podcast before I paused it to focus on the book. And the podcast was called Mind Your Money with MissBeHelpful as like a way to test it. And I really liked it. I thought it was really fun. And I was getting a lot of positive feedback from all of my followers and the listeners and stuff. And so I said, you know what, it's already my ecosystem. I'm going to go with it and make the book Mind Your Money.
Yeah. Another two other reasons I really like it. First of all, mindset, right? Mind your money.
Yes.
Like so much of all of this has to do with how you're looking, your perspective on it, and also mind your manners, right? That's the other side of like girls being told. I mean, I think your book is probably for everybody. It's not gender specific, but if we're thinking about this for women, we're often taught to like be nice, right? So mind your manners, and I like it about mind your money also. So the triple entendre here is really good. In the last minute, the question that I ask all the coaches that I have on these lives is fundamental elements of being your own biggest champion when it comes to work, money, and life.
Yes.
And there really hasn't been the same answer and I've had now maybe like 15, 20 people on. So curious for you, what would that be? And by the way, if I want to define champion, self-champion, I would say probably advocate, right? Making sure that you're sort of not doing what your mom did, right? And like really knowing and owning and speaking up for your worth. Yeah. And you had some good stuff to say on that one.
I love this question because I think, first of all, we all should be constantly thinking about how to advocate for ourselves all the time more, especially women out there listening. But for me, I thought right away being a humble hotshot. So I used to work at this nonprofit that did literacy intervention. So we would support public schools with majority of students that were from low income families. So a lot of the kids were actually really far behind in reading. So they weren't reading on grade level. If they were in the third grade, they were actually only able to read books from first grade. And so they needed, some additional attention outside of their class. So we would get volunteers from the community and everybody would come in and pair a volunteer up with a kid and they would read and do vocabulary words and grammar and all the things and help them so that by the end of the year, they could catch up to their peers and be on grade level. And one of the leaders, she was a woman leader in that organization, one time said to me, one thing that I like about you is that you're a humble hotshot. And I was like, ooh, hot shot doesn't sound so good. She's like, no, but it's a humble hot shot. So the way that you do it is not threatening. It's not self-centered. It's the humility is such an essential aspect of being a humble hot shot because it's about recognizing that, success is a result of collective efforts and acknowledging like all of the contributions that other people have made to your success and to the success of a project or whatever that you're building. But it's so important to avoid arrogance, complete arrogance, not listening to others, being super self-centered, not showing a genuine interest in, other people's ideas and achievements. And she's like, you're really a team player in the fact that you're constantly listening, paying attention constantly to what your team, to the volunteers, the people around you, and you're a real true leader. And then you come in and then when the right time comes, you talk about your achievements and your confidence kind of comes across and you do it in such a humble way. It's not coming from a place of arrogance. So everyone knows that you're intelligent, you're well achieved, that you're the leader in the room, you command the room without being arrogant about it. And that's why she called me a humble hotshot. And I think that's one of the best compliments I have ever gotten. I love that it's an alliteration too, humble hotshot. It's easy to remember. But I always say that when I get questions like this, I think like, I want to be more of a humble hotshot. And I'm honored that she called me that and thought of me as a humble hotshot because I think more women need to do that. More women need to advocate for themselves from a place of, collective energy, gratitude, practicing humility, but communicating effectively what your strengths are, what your achievements are. Don't let people, be fooled about like who you are and what you're about. But remember to constantly be listening and learning because at the end of the day, if it comes off as just self-promotion and, arrogance, you lose the ability to connect with people and get them to actually see who you are authentically and where your confidence is coming from and what your achievements are. So I would say being a humble hotshot, it's balancing your humility with also being confident and constantly talking about your wins, your successes, and your achievements in a way that comes from excitement around the collective energy towards the progress being made in whatever that is, your project, your job, whatever scope of work you're doing, and making sure it's not rooted in arrogance.
Right, right. I like to think of it instead of self-promotion, it's really service promotion. So what are
Mhm.
you doing that can help? I mean, to your handle, right? MissBeHelpful. It's like,
Yes.
yes, here's what I'm offering. So it is
Yeah,
about you, but it's in relation to how you're helping another person.
I love that.
Speaking of helping other people, you offer so many services. So please tell us, how can people find you, follow you, and most importantly, pay you, or in your case, buy your book? Yes.
Yes. Okay, you can buy my book at mindyourmoneybook.com. Mindyourmoneybook.com has information about the book, so you can see the chapter titles and the description for each chapter. You can also buy the book at mindyourmoneybook.com, and there's also a free downloadable guide that pairs with the book, which you can download. And one of my favorite things about that guide is I spent hours creating a spreadsheet that has over 200 financial influencers and creators that focus on financial education content. So I don't think there's anything else like it out there. I've, spent time on Google and I always find, 13 financial influencers you should follow, or like 10 women in finance you should be following on. And I'm like, okay, 10? But like that's not enough. Like people need to fill their feed, their For You page. They need to people's, socials, Instagram, everything needs to be overflowing with this stuff because we really need it, to be inundated with it so that we feel confident about talking about this and learning about it. So there's that. And there's a bunch of other free stuff. And that's mindyourmoneybook.com. And then if you want to hire me to speak or to coach you one-on-one, you can do all of that on missbehelpful.com. And you can just scroll down to book me with the Calendly link. And all of that is, it's either mindyourmoneybook.com for the book or missbehelpful.com, MISSBE helpful.
Awesome. And then also just make sure once we're done, you'll post some of those links in on LinkedIn. Thank you. Thank you to you for being here. Thank you to everybody for watching at whatever time that you watched it. You're one of my absolute favorite, not just financial educators, but people. Next time we got to talk about how you maintain your energy because you got a lot of it and so do I. But there's also, a question of sustainability and you're human and I'm sure you have your low moments. So how you keep yourself going. So next time we may not talk about money at all. It might be actually about sort of maintaining motivation and sort of energy management. Congratulations on this book. It looks gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. And I'm just so excited for everybody who gets to read it. All right.
Thank you so much. You're amazing, Claire. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Bye. Now go get paid.